So what is winter for? I mean, it's half over, and it seems like a reasonable time to ask the question, what is winter for? Now, if you ran a grocery store in Florida, for example, winter would be all about making money. The snowbirds are all in town, and the roads are clogged with people driving 15 miles an hour. And you have to hire extra staff to bag and box the groceries, take it out to their cars. Or maybe you're an author, and you spend the winter revising your notes that you made during the summer or the spring or the fall and are turning it into a book or an article. Or maybe you're one of those people who's affected by the short days of winter, and you spend it curled up in a chair, just waiting for spring, for joy to return to your life. What's winter for? For school kids, as I remember it, winter is the best time for clubs. I have one friend whose French club is planning a trip to Paris in the spring. Chess tournaments tend to happen this time of year. And yearbooks are being finalized, I think. Do they still do yearbooks? I don't know. This shows how disconnected I am with that particular part of the world. Do you have a winter project? Do you isolate yourself in wintertime, or do you become more social? Now, if you lived in New Orleans, the answer almost certainly would be, I become more social, because winter means carnival in New Orleans. And if Thomas Jefferson had written the Declaration of Independence in New Orleans, the things listed as self-evident would be life, liberty, and Mardi Gras. And while it once was a one-day affair, the day before Ash Wednesday and the beginning of Lent, Fat Tuesday, which is the translation of the words Mardi Gras, has now become an entire carnival season, with the official holiday on Tuesday and a bridge day called Lundi Gras on Monday, when incidentally almost nothing gets done in the city except eating and parading. And then there's Sunday before that, and Saturday before that, and the weekend before that, and the weekend before that. It keeps going. I spent 2 years in New Orleans trying to figure all this out, what the Mardi Gras mindset was. And this, I suppose, is a final report. Mardi Gras is not just a day or a season of parties. It's a way of thinking, a way of loving, a way of life. And that makes it kind of hard to explain. The closest thing we have around here, I suppose, is the Mummers Parade. How many of you have been to the Mummers Parade? Pretty good crowd, actually. That's cool. Or maybe the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. Any of you been up to New York for that? You two have? That's good. How many of you have seen it on TV? That's a much better number. Okay. Or even the Rose Parade in California. How many of you have seen that? Maybe some of you have been to California. I almost ended up in Pasadena on an internship and thought, oh good, I'll get to see the Rose Parade in person. I'm not sure that I did particularly badly at going to New Orleans instead. Anyway, these only really hint about what Mardi Gras is. Last night I counted, there were 63 different parades that were listed for this year's Mardi Gras. And they were spread over a month before Fat Tuesday. Some of them take place downtown and in communities around New Orleans. It's a metropolitan area of 1.1 million people, and some people call it a small town of 1.1 million people because, like Philadelphia, it's made up of neighborhoods. And if you were around for my sermon last year, you know that parades are put on by crews. That's Krews. And originally these were groups of rich white men who showed their wealth in the weeks before Lent. There's an older tradition of Mardi Gras where poor people would go to the rich people's houses and beg for food. And there's something about a chicken that we're not going to go into, but people ended up running around town chasing a chicken. So there we go. Until about 1850 or so, the big thing was to hold masked balls during carnival season. And a few of the crews only do balls. Each crew ends up with its own traditions. I have a friend who joined the crew of Endymion, and there's a penguin with Endymion nicely written on it, a couple of decades ago. They're a somewhat modern crew. This year, their celebrity grand marshal, by the way, is Kelly Clarkson. So there we have it. No, not many Kelly Clarkson fans in the crowd. Oh, well, so it goes. Anyway, my friend joined a couple of decades ago. He paid several $100s and got invited by somebody who knew somebody and had the right to go to the ball. Now, the crew of Endymion is a little bit odd in that they have a tradition of selecting their king. They select it by chance, sort of like a door prize. So if you go, who knows? And by sheer luck, at his first ball, my friend was named King Endymion for a year. And he was given this gigantic ornate costume, looks sort of like the mummers, and paraded about because in Endymion, anyone can be king. Endymion is a parading crew. It's in fact one of the really big parading crews. They got a huge parade with lots of floats, custom-built trailers hauled by big farm tractors, and some of them powered internally. And these are Mardi Gras floats. They aren't like the Rose Parade floats. They're not covered with beautiful rose petals or whatever else. I don't know, what was it, plumerias? You listen to the descriptions of the Rose Parade, and it's always full of these exotic flower types you'd never heard of. They're made of paper mache, and they've got usually figures of Greek or Egyptian gods on them, brightly painted. When an Endymion float passes by, it doesn't have beauty queens all waving. It's loaded with crew members, who are mostly men, who spend the entire time throwing gifts to the crowd. Like this, or here's some beads. Here's a little alligator, I guess. These are throw cups. Very popular, that was Crew of Chaos. From a distance, actually, if you look at one of these things, it looks like a bus with a sprinkler on it because there's just stuff flying out of it nonstop. And that's a big difference. In the Tournament of Roses parade, the audience gets some beauty and some music. In the Mummers parade, they get music and performance and maybe some hot pretzels. But in Mardi Gras, you get fancy floats, marching bands, and stuff. The beads, moon pies are a popular throw, so are potato chip bags, super balls, frisbees, stuffed animals, and of course these magical throw cups, which are just everywhere in New Orleans. And you get that for just showing up. My mentor in New Orleans, Rev Melanie, reminded me that the most effective way of getting lots of throws wasn't to be socially rude at all. It was just to hold up a little sign that said, "This is my first Mardi Gras." People with those signs hold them up for the first little bit of the parade, and then they've been hit by so much stuff that they hide it because they don't have any bags to carry things. Sometimes they just throw the bags at you so that you can stuff all the stuff that was in the bags back into the bags and take them home. Riding in a crew, it's your job to make parade watchers happy. That's the mindset of Mardi Gras. That's the social contract of the season. Now, earlier I said that crews were traditionally all wealthy white men and the people in power in New Orleans. But over the past century, that's changed. In 1991, the city of New Orleans refused parade permits to crews that discriminated on the basis of race, religion, gender, or sexual orientation. And indeed, that law was challenged, but it changed the dynamic of the Mardi Gras parade. And what also happened was that there's this Mardi Gras mindset that says when somebody's excluding you, you got several choices. You can challenge them legally, you can carry protest signs and protest them, or you can change the world by making them irrelevant. In 1916, a neighborhood organization in the poorer black area of town changed its name to the Zulu Social Aid and Pleasure Club. It became the first black crew and later, just by evolution, into a multiracial crew. The original purpose of the club was to take contributions from everybody in the community so that funeral expenses could be paid, because so that the community could support each other in the event of somebody dying. Now, Zulu, for some reason entirely too complicated to explain, they throw or hand out. There's actually a law in the state of Louisiana that you cannot be sued if you have a coconut thrown at you during Mardi Gras. I am not kidding here. They have hand-painted coconuts, which are the prized throws of the crew. And I never caught a coconut, I'm afraid. I may have to go back. But what's interesting is that in Zululand in Africa, there are no coconuts. It's just a thing, you know? Just like the King Arthur dragon. King Arthur didn't fight dragons. That was some other king, you know? It's like, anyway, truth doesn't much matter during Mardi Gras. That's one thing for true. But for weeks ahead of time, they have to prepare all these coconuts. They have to be painted gold. They have to have different phrases written on them. And so like every weeknight, you go to the social hall, and there's a long production line of preparing the coconuts, painting them, letting them dry, writing things on them, and putting the holder on them and everything else, and then packing them up so that they can be shipped off to the actual parade. It's an amazing group activity. And actually, apparently coconuts were chosen because they were pretty cheap coming into the port of New Orleans, so why not? Let's use them. Women were excluded from crews for many years, and so the crew of muses was created. And, I got a little tiny muses thing. That's kind of cool. It's like a little leaf. Anyway, with women designing the floats and marching units and things like that, the whole angle is different. The cruise parade is actually pretty bizarre. Their prize throw is a ornately decorated high heel shoe. And if you get one, you go around, I got a shoe, it's cool. The doubloons, which they throw, have pictures of shoes on them. And the floats all stick to the sort of shoe theme. They have marching units that are, let's see, there's a pole that goes up and it holds the middle of a giant butterfly, and then there are two poles, and they can make the butterfly fly down the street. It's really incredibly beautiful stuff. I'll take that over the Rose Parade any day. But now there are actually other crews that are mostly women. My boss and the chaplain service at the hospital joined a crew called Iris. It's one of the newer women's crews. And there's even a sort of a religious historical crew that celebrates St. Joan of Arc's birthday. She was the Maid of Orleans, so why not do it in New Orleans? Born on January 6th, which is the official start of carnival season, 12th night. They have a parade that goes through the French Quarter, big surprise there, and their gifts are wooden swords and sharing cake as Joan of Arc brought food to the people. The Mardi Gras mindset says, if you want to celebrate, celebrate. Last weekend I was in New Orleans and I attended 4 parades. 2 were the sort of traditional ones, and I got some beads here. I think I have the blue ones there. But the other 2 were much more untraditional, created by folks who were just starting their careers, just out of college or out of high school or whatever else, living in a community called Bywater. One was the intergalactic crew of Chewbacca's. They celebrated space and time travel using mostly human-powered floats. They didn't allow internal combustion engines. And the other one was called T-Rex, or like petit in the Cajun words that they say. That's Jim and that's Petit Jim, meaning the smaller one of the 2 Jims. Anyway, T-Rex took another angle because the floats were getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And like Endymion has this huge train that is like a city block long and just totally huge. The T-Rex went the other way. And their floats are about this big. And they're basically little miniatures with little dolls and figures on them, and they're pulled by somebody. Usually they clear out the whole roadway for the marching bands and everything else in most of the other crews. But in T-Rex, people are basically, if you look straight down on them, you might hit your head from the people on the other side. It's just this incredibly small scale parade that the problem is that the crowds are so tight together that sometimes they just strangle off the parade and it has to stop. And like the marching band finishes the tune and whatever and goes into a bar, has a drink, comes back out, it's just a totally bizarre idea to do things, and a great use of random figures from dollar stores, actually. Anyway, so the parade tends to get stuck, and indeed, I think actually the sermon has gotten stuck, because I'm just describing stuff instead of talking about the question, what is winter for? Remember that one? That was wax someplace there. In New Orleans, creativity, mayhem, and joy. That's what winter's for. And that's not a bad thing. The carnival mindset makes poor people kings, lampoons the powerful, and provides endless reminders that it is good to be alive. If ever I cease to love, may the fish get legs and the cows lay eggs. If ever I cease to love, and love is the mindset. Now, I don't want to paint a picture of New Orleans as Shangri-La. There's still plenty of racism and sexism and homophobia and blatant classism in the city. It's going to take a generation for the city to evolve to a different place, and I hope it's a better place and more fair community. But I think the mindset helps everyone survive and strive. For the months leading up to Ash Wednesday, the beginning of Lent, the whole city seems to be involved in group activities, planning balls, sewing costumes, or decorating floats, practicing dance steps, or marching, or putting together marching band music. New Orleans becomes the most generous city in America for a few months. Once you've lived in an environment of celebration and plenty, it's a shock to move to a place of stinginess and competition. The year after Hurricane Katrina, the authorities wanted New Orleans to cancel Mardi Gras because it would tax the police force too much. It would be dangerous. There might be, who knows. They gave lots of really good reasons, but they didn't understand. The celebration isn't about good times. It's about living and loving and seeing celebration in all times. As it turns out, there were fewer parades. They all had to use exactly the same route so that the police didn't have to rush from one place to another. But they did roll, and the season was celebrated. Crews provided social networks to help with the recovery. Marching bands and traditional songs provided something positive to think about for those who were still in town, often working 2 jobs to make enough money to buy the materials to fix their houses. The crew of muses put on a parade that was somewhat smaller than normal. And the last float in the parade was silent and had no people on it, as a reminder of what had been lost. The song, If Ever I Cease to Love, doesn't say who to love or what to love. In a rock and roll song popular after Katrina, the words were, "Take me back to New Orleans and drop me at my door, 'cause I may love you, yeah, but I love me more. To love your neighbor, you must love yourself." And maybe that's what the Mardi Gras mindset is. Maybe that's what winter is for, to love yourself by finding joy, community, and self-expression in the sharing society created around Mardi Gras. And once you get that feeling, you really don't want to let it go. Generosity and love oozes into Lent with the celebration of St. Joseph Day and St. Patrick's Day, into Easter, and on to the spring festival season, into summer nights at jazz and blues clubs, and even into the autumn football season. And the Saints definitely needed all the goodwill they could get this year. And then on to Christmas. Now, one of the fun things about the Mardi Gras mindset is that you can use it as a metaphor for other things. A month or so ago, I missed an important event. One of my friends, Deanna Van Diever, was ordained at the First Unitarian Universalist Church in New Orleans. And it was a wonderful ceremony. The group Emma's Revolution came and played a concert and played for her ordination. And she did, when I saw her this past weekend, she did give me a present too. She gave me 2 of her throw cups. It says, Rev Deanna Van Diever, 3 congregations, 1 ordination, November 12th, 2012. And I instantly knew that that was part of the celebration. Imagine if every season of your life was a season of love. What a wonderful world it would be. Amen.